In 1895, Lord Kelvin, the president of the British Royal Society, and a man who arguably knew more about physics than anyone else on the planet, declared that heavier-than-air flying machines are impossible. He wasn't just being a pessimist, he was being scientifically certain. Just 8 years later, in 1903, two bicycle mechanics from Ohio who clearly didn't get the memo proved the smartest man in the world wrong for exactly 12 seconds. That is all it took. 12 seconds to turn a 500-ton impossibility into your next holiday flight. Welcome to a 15-minute intervention for your common sense. We are going to discuss how an object weighing 500,000 kilograms / 1.1 million pounds, roughly the weight of 100 adult elephants or a small mountain of metal, doesn't just plummet to the ground the moment the pilot stops believing in it. You are likely sitting in your living room thinking that flying is a bit like magic. It isn't. It is a very expensive, very loud, and very precise battle against gravity. For the next quarter hour, we are going to strip away the magic and replace it with cold, hard industrial logic. We will look at how 16,000 people in a small town in Germany build these giants with the precision of a Swiss watch, why we fire frozen poultry into engines for fun, and why your sense of taste is basically a casualty of altitude. By the end of this, you'll understand the tomato juice mystery and why there is a deliberate, terrifying-looking hole in your window. Trust me, if that hole wasn't there, your flight would be significantly more explosive than you'd like. Let's get to work. Flying is essentially a four-way tug of war. It is a violent mathematical argument between lift, weight, drag, and thrust. If lift equals weight, you stay in the air. If thrust equals drag, you keep moving. Simple, right? In theory, yes. In practice, it's a symphony performed by 500,000 parts that all have to agree not to fail at the same time. You've actually already done the research. Think back to when you were a child or a bored adult, sticking your hand out of a car window at 80 kilometers per hour / 50 miles per hour. If you tilt your palm up, the wind catches it and shoves your arm upward. Congratulations, you've discovered the angle of attack. You were an aerospace engineer at 7 years old. You just didn't have the funding. Now, let's talk about the great wing myth. You were likely taught that the wing is curved on top so that the air has to travel a longer distance, meaning it has to move faster to catch up with the air on the bottom. This is called the equal transit time theory, and it is, to use a technical term, absolute rubbish. Air doesn't have a social schedule. It doesn't care about meeting its friends at the back of the wing. Real lift is a Socratic dialogue between Bernoulli and Newton. Bernoulli's principle tells us that faster air equals lower pressure. Because of the wing's shape, the airfoil, the air on top does move faster, creating a low pressure zone that literally sucks the wing upward. But Newton is also at the party. Newton's third law says for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. The wing is shaped to deflect air downward. If you push air down, the air pushes you up. It's both pressure and deflection. A beautiful mathematical symphony of air molecules being bullied into submission. But don't get greedy. If a pilot tries to climb too steeply, the angle of attack becomes too high. The air can no longer stick to the surface of the wing. It starts to swirl and break away. The lift vanishes, and your 500,000 kilograms / 1.1 million pounds machine becomes a very expensive brick. This is a stall, and at 10 kilometers / 33,000 feet, you really don't want to be a brick. Modern aircraft are not built in the way you might build a shed. They are orchestrated. At the Airbus factory in Hamburg-Finkenwerder, 16,000 people manage a flow line that would make a Swiss watchmaker weep. This factory is a small town with its own fire department, medical center, and harbor. Components arrive from all over Europe. wings from Broughton, fuselages from St. Nazaire, and horizontal stabilizers from Getafe. Take the A320 for example. In Hangar 9, the aircraft moves through 4 stations. Each station has a takt time of exactly 2 days. At Station 40, the 16-meter/52-foot wings are attached to the fuselage. This is where things get obsessive. The engineers don't just bolt it on. They measure the position with an accuracy of 0.4 millimeters/0.015 inches. That's less than the thickness of a few sheets of paper. To ensure the hull is perfectly straight, they use mirrors and balls to guide a finely calibrated laser beam. If the fuselage is off by even a fraction, the interior modules won't fit. You think your IKEA cabinet was hard to level? Try doing it with a 13-meter/43-foot section of an A350 using a joystick to maneuver the weight of several houses. The airframe, the Drakletadla, is a masterpiece of weight management. We use aluminum for the skin, but the load-bearing spars are often titanium. Why? Because the wing isn't a rigid plank, it is a massive shock absorber. If you look out the window during turbulence and see the wing flexing, do not panic. A Boeing 787 wing can flex up to 8 meters/26 feet. If it didn't flex, the structural stress would simply snap it off like a dry twig. In Hamburg, the wings are effectively glued and riveted. They apply a sealant to the entire junction area, which they have only 4 hours to finish before it hardens, and then they drive in 2,000 titanium rivets per wing. This bond has to hold for 40 years of vibrating at 900 kilometers per hour/560 miles per hour, while the temperature outside swings from plus 50 degrees Celsius/122 degrees Fahrenheit on a tarmac in Dubai to minus 50 degrees Celsius/minus 58 degrees Fahrenheit at altitude. Even the paint is a technical nightmare. The maximum allowed thickness is exactly 330 microns. If the paint is too thick, the plane is too heavy. Entire aircraft have been sent back to the paint shop and repainted because they were just a few microns over. And if a single insect gets stuck in that wet paint, it's a snag on the quality sheet. The inspectors are that demanding. If the wings are the logic, the engines are the muscle. A single GE90 engine is wider than the entire cabin of a Boeing 737. One of these beasts generates enough power to match 3,500 passenger cars. It inhales more than a ton of air every single second. To make sure these engines don't quit on you, we subject them to the chicken cannon. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's a pneumatic gun that fires frozen or dead chickens into a running engine at hundreds of kilometers per hour. If the engine can't ingest a bird strike without the fan blades disintegrating, it's back to the drawing board. It's a bad day for the chicken, but a great day for your peace of mind. But engines can fail. So, in the very tip of the tail cone sits the APU, the Auxiliary Power Unit. It's a small, third gas generator engine. It's the backup brain. It provides electricity and air pressure to start the main engines and keeps your air conditioning running while the giants are sleeping. Without the APU, the main engines couldn't even wake up. If both main engines fail, which is statistically almost impossible, you don't fall like a stone. A modern jet can glide. For every 1 kilometer of altitude, it can glide about 15 to 20 kilometers/9 to 12 miles forward. At 10 kilometers up, a pilot has over 150 kilometers/93 miles of searching time to find a runway. Gravity is a patient landlord. You have time to pay the rent. We fly at 10 kilometers/33,000 feet not for the view, but for the fuel bill. This is the tropopause. The air here is thin, which means less drag, but there's a problem. Your body needs 14 pounds per square inch of air pressure to function. At 10 kilometers, the pressure is a meager 4 pounds per square inch. If the cabin weren't pressurized, you'd be unconscious in seconds, and your blood would essentially start a very unpleasant chemical protest. This is why the cabin is a pressurized tube. And yes, that secret hole in your window. It's called a bleed hole. It balances the pressure between the cabin and the outer panes, ensuring the thick outer glass takes the structural load. If that tiny hole wasn't there, the frost and pressure would crack the glass. It's the smallest, most important bit of safety equipment you've been ignoring. If the pressure fails, the masks drop. But here's a deep cut. Those masks don't have oxygen tanks. There isn't enough room to carry thousands of heavy metal bottles. Instead, there's a chemical oxygen generator above your head. When you pull the mask, you trigger a chemical reaction that creates oxygen. It only lasts 12 to 15 minutes, just enough time for the pilot to dive into the thicker air below. You're also not breathing stale air. The air in the cabin is refreshed every 2 to 3 minutes. It's bleed air, siphoned off the engines, cooled, filtered, and pumped back in. It's drier than the Sahara Desert, with humidity often below 12%. But it's cleaner than the air in your office. You are essentially breathing processed engine breath. You're welcome. Pilots live in a world of paranoid caution. For instance, they never eat the same meal. If the fish is bad and the captain gets food poisoning, the first officer must be standing by with a stomach of steel. They also have to pass rigorous medicals and psychological tests before they can even touch a joystick. To even be a co-pilot, you need 200 hours of flight time. To be a captain, at least 1,000. And then, the tomato juice. Why do you crave it? Because the 12% humidity and low pressure kill 30% of your taste bud sensitivity to salt and sugar. Your food tastes like cardboard, so your brain looks for umami, that savory taste found in tomatoes that actually gets enhanced in low pressure. That juice is the only thing on the plane that tastes like real life. On a 19-hour flight, pilots don't just drink coffee. There are secret sleep compartments, tiny hidden bunks above the ceiling or under the floor. While you're fighting for armrest space, the captain is likely taking a controlled rest in a bunk that's more comfortable than your seat will ever be. Flying isn't a miracle. It's a victory of logic over gravity. It's 2,000 rivets, 330 microns of paint, 12% humidity, and the combined genius of thousands of engineers who refuse to listen to Lord Kelvin. Next time you're annoyed that your seat doesn't recline enough, just remember, you're sitting in a pressurized carbon fiber tube 10 kilometers / 33,000 feet in the air, held up by invisible math and 100% pure human stubbornness. Did you know about the tomato juice umami trick or the bleed hole in your window? Tell me your favorite aviation secret in the comments. I read them all between my own flights. Subscribe for more technical deep dives into the machines that run our world. See you in the sky.